Story 1. I do not produce the hunger hormone, so I forget to eat until my body reminds me it is time to eat. I have a reminder on my phone to eat, but when I am busy, I turn it off and carry on with what I am doing. Then I forget. This compounds throughout the day until night rolls around, and I have not had anything to eat since the previous night. I get hypoglycemic. I stand up, get lightheaded, fall down, and wake up a few seconds later twitching with a sore face, often with my dog licking my ear. I get the same questions quite a bit, so I will answer some of them here. I still enjoy food and even crave foods. I do not have a stomach due to another issue years ago, so I cannot eat very much of anything. For the most part, I eat regularly out of habit or because others around me are eating, but it is really easy to get distracted and not eat until my body tells me that I need to eat immediately. I keep glucose tablets in a few places to get me by until I can get something else. A spoonful of peanut butter will also hold me over long enough to make something more substantial. When I crave food, it has been explained to me as psychological hunger rather than physical hunger. It is a learned behavior and not a physical trigger. My brain is telling me that lasagna sounds really good rather than my body triggering a physical need for lasagna. It is simple to ignore or get distracted and have the craving go away. I am a firefighter, and there have been times on long calls when we are distracted by everything else going on that I have had to walk up to the rehabilitation trailer for a granola bar or the paramedics for a glucose packet to stop the sensations warning me I am entering the final phase before fainting. Fainting is not common. I have to ignore a few other warnings before reaching that point. I get lightheaded, clammy, slur my speech, become lethargic, sometimes have tremors, and sweat a lot before reaching the fainting phase. Story 2. I have fainted randomly since I was a child. It is called vasovagal syncope. Sometimes there are specific triggers, and other times my body just goes haywire. It starts with a rise in body temperature. Then my vision darkens, my heart races, my ears ring, I sweat profusely, and then I faint. I have fainted many times, but as I get older, I am much better at managing presyncope, which is the onset of the symptoms. If you lie down, sometimes it normalizes blood pressure and the feeling goes away. Other times, you faint while lying down, which is still better than hitting your head. Story 3. Felt dizzy and ignored it. Woke up on the floor with everyone staring. 10 out of 10 would recommend eating breakfast next time. Story 4. Food poisoning. It was kind of funny afterwards. I had just finished eating a burger from the pit, sat down, and turned on the local news. The news said not to eat meat due to a recall from the exact place where I had bought the burger meat. Later, I got up to help my wife in the middle of the night. She also ate the meat, was vomiting, and asked to go to the emergency room. I went to get our infant daughter to take her along to the emergency room. I woke up on the ground by her crib with my wife screaming at me and trying to wake me up. In the end, my wife drove me to the emergency room. Story 5. I slid down the corner of a bathroom stall and woke up wondering what had happened. I never donated plasma again. Story 6. It was very hot, and I fell to the floor at a bus stop. My boyfriend at the time did nothing and let me fall and hit my head. A girl from across the street came over and talked to me when I regained consciousness. She reassured me and said she had fainted many times. She was very supportive. Story 7. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I stand up, and my heart rate goes from 80 to over 120, and everything goes hot and gray before I hit the floor. Most of the time, I reach a couch or bed, or my husband catches me. Story 8. I have a heart condition, so before I was medicated, I used to faint a lot. It started with my vision going dark around the edges, then blacking out completely. My limbs would get weak, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up on the floor. Story 9. Vasovagal response occurs when the veins and arteries do not constrict in the legs quickly enough to maintain equal pressure, causing blood to pool in the legs. This commonly happens to older people who stand up too fast. Pilots wear compression suits to prevent this condition. I know young people who experience it, but it did not happen to me until my late 40s. Story 10. Wow, I fainted 3 times in my life, so I think I can speak on this. I have gotten used to knowing when it will come. For me, my vision becomes very bright and overly saturated. Then I get really weak until everything just turns black. Story 11. You get dizzy, start sweating, your vision grays out, and if you don't lie flat quickly, you will lose consciousness and fall. It is not fun. Story 12. I have fainted several times in my life. Sometimes it was physiological, caused by dehydration, lack of nutrition, or sleep deprivation. Other times it was psychological, related to stress, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, or depression. Story 13. Heat exhaustion. I was standing in direct sunlight. It was hot, and apparently my body decided to shut down, and I passed out for a few seconds. Luckily, I was fine afterward. Story 14. My wife took the empty Amazon boxes past the back patio and put them into the recycling bin. It was incredible. Story 15. I stepped on a loose flagstone and rolled my ankle so badly that the lateral ankle bone touched the ground. I thought for sure I had snapped something for that to happen. I limped over to a small wall, put my head down, and started breathing deeply to block out some of the pain. No dizziness or anything, just intense pain. I woke up to my girlfriend and my dog kneeling over me, worried. If that's what death is like, it's not so bad. Postscript. Nothing was broken, torn, pulled, or sprained. It swelled just a tiny bit with a little bruising. No pain afterward. I was right as rain in a day or so. It was pretty uncanny. Story 16. I was a bicycle racer in the 1990s and 2000s. My resting heart rate was 31 beats per minute. If I stood up too fast, I would lose consciousness. Story 17. At age 10, I discovered I could make my face very red by holding my breath and clenching really hard. I was showing off this skill to some classmates. Then I slowly woke up on the classroom floor. No one got the teacher or called for help because they thought I was faking it. Story 18. I had just had a pilonidal cystectomy and had an opening filled with gauze on my lower back just above my buttocks. Enough time had passed that, according to the doctor's instructions, it was time for the gauze to be removed. My mom pulled it out and said it was similar to that circus trick where a clown pulls a long scarf out of their throat. The gauze just kept going and going. Once it was all out, I started gingerly walking back towards my bed, but apparently the sudden removal of a large item from my body triggered a shock response. I felt like I was going to vomit. I started sweating heavily in an instant. Everything started going black and I heard a loud ringing in my ears. I began to collapse, but my parents caught me and helped me back to my bed. That whole recovery process was difficult. I was bedridden for 2 straight weeks. My strongest memories of that period were that moment of almost fainting and playing The Last of Us, which was released the day after my surgery in the summer of 2013. Story 19. Watching television, I suddenly felt extremely dizzy, lightheaded, and somewhat nauseated. I had the idea to go outside in 14-degree weather after dark to see if it would help me feel better. It made me worse, so I turned around and walked into my front door. Suddenly, it was as if all the noises in the room slowed down and echoed while my vision faded to black, and I could no longer stand. Then I felt amazing. I felt safe, warm, and almost euphoric. I saw gold sparkles in a dark space and thought I saw sparkly gold figures around me in a hazy darkness. Then I woke up on the floor in my living room, with my husband hovering over me, looking terrified. Story 20. I was 16 and home alone with extreme cramps. I got out of the shower and opened the door to the hallway. Then it was lights out. I think I came to pretty quickly, but it shook me up. Story 21. I accidentally inhaled powdered sugar that was on my French toast. It was the first time I had powdered sugar on my French toast during a sleepover when I was about 10. I knew I was going to faint and could feel it happening. I woke up with the plate of French toast, which had both powdered sugar and maple syrup on it, dumped all over me. Story 22. Mammogram, sort of. I was getting ready for surgery on a benign breast lump. The doctor wanted the lump marked. Unfortunately, being a large-breasted woman and compressed in the mammogram machine for 20 minutes was not the best combination. The technician released the compression all at once, which caused blood to rush back into my breast, causing me to lose consciousness. I woke up on the floor with a doctor over me. It took 2 smelling salts to revive me. I also lost control of my bladder, which was unpleasant. Story 23. I have vasovagal syncope, which is fainting caused by triggers such as emotional stress or seeing blood. It happens a couple of times a year, generally triggered by medical situations, so I guess I have fainted a lot. Most recently, I fainted while reading about possible conditions linked to a certain blood test result. The time before that was when I absent-mindedly read an article about plastic surgery. It is an extremely strange sensation. Story 24. Some fifth graders at camp said, "Want to try this really cool thing? Breathe in and out quickly, and then I will squeeze your neck for a moment." I was the 16-year-old counselor, so I dug deep into my sense of responsibility and said, "Yeah, that sounds cool, but I cannot let you do that to another child. You can try on me instead." I woke up on the floor surrounded by some very frightened children. Story 25. Had whooping cough about 15 years ago, also known as pertussis, and coughed so hard that I fainted and collapsed to the floor twice. Story 26. I have fainted many times in my life. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere, but I have learned to be more aware of what can cause it. It is a combination of any of the following: not eating enough, being overheated, and being dehydrated. I generally feel lightheaded and shaky, and sometimes I start sweating a lot before it happens. I have broken my neck, wrist, and ankle, and I have had many bruises. Luckily, I have not had any episodes, aside from getting a little lightheaded, in the past 3 years. Knock on wood. Story 27. I am a diabetic. I did not realize my blood sugar was dropping. I sat in my car at work for half an hour. I came to, drank my emergency soda, and never told anyone until now. Story 28. I joined the long, prestigious family legacy of fainting over nothing multiple times. We are professionals. Story 29. What happened? The ground suddenly rose and knocked me out. Seriously, I just became dehydrated on a very hot day. I experienced tunnel vision, then complete vision loss, and then the ground hit me in the face. Story 30. I, a 100-pound 20-year-old female at the time, was at a store checking out and suddenly remembered thinking how hot it was when I felt sweat dripping down my forehead and back, which was very uncommon even during most grueling workouts. As my vision started to go black and white, I thought, I just need them to hurry up so I can leave. The person ahead finished, and I took 3 steps to the front door before passing out. I fell forward but luckily did not break my nose or sustain other injuries. I did urinate, which is apparently a symptom of passing out. I woke up on the floor and passed out again. Paramedics arrived, and my blood pressure had dropped to 64/40 by the time they got there. This happened again that summer, and I never figured out why. Even today, at age 29, my blood pressure remains around 90/70 on a normal day. I also never returned to that T-Mobile location. Story 31. I collapsed in a store after seeing a movie with my wife. I hit the edge of a shelf and woke up in a hospital receiving 3 stitches in my head. They determined it was probably dehydration as I had only had popcorn and cola in the preceding 5 hours. Story 32. I have fainted twice in my life. The first time was at 16 years old. I ran over 10 miles in the middle of the day during a Florida summer. When I got home, I knelt down to look at something my mother was showing me on the computer. The next thing I knew, I woke up on the floor with her yelling my name. The second time was last summer. I caught an unknown gastrointestinal illness from my then partner and thought I could drive home. A severe wave of nausea overtook me. The world started spinning, and I woke up in the median of the Ohio Turnpike. The car was totaled, and I spent 3 days in the hospital. The only injury I sustained was a scratch on my eyebrow. Story 33. I was smoking a cigarette while sitting on a bike rack, watching a man in a praying mantis costume play guitar behind him. Story 34. One time, I went to get my septum pierced. I was sitting up 1 minute with the piercer in front of me, stabbing a needle through my septum. The next minute, he was behind the table I was on, holding me in his arms, and I was missing a shoe. He apparently had to jump over the table to catch me. My shoe flew off as I was falling backward. The other times I passed out were from blood draws. Story 35. Anorexia and sharp objects are dangerous. The first time, I was dissecting a rat and did not realize it was happening that day. I also had a migraine coming on. The second time, at the gynecologist, we were discussing me getting an intrauterine device, and the idea of a needle piercing my cervix upset me. Story 36. Walked 3 miles to work, worked a 10-hour shift, got off and donated plasma. Then walked 3 miles home in 95 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures with 96% humidity. I was 2 blocks from home when I sat down because things got fuzzy and it was hard to breathe. The next thing I knew, everything went black and I woke up to an ambulance. Story 37. I was getting set up to enter a magnetic resonance imaging machine for a scan when the nurse suddenly pulled out a very long needle, which I was completely unprepared for. She said, "We need to inject contrast dye. Give me your arm." I remember her and her assistant shaking me slightly and asking if I was okay. I was already sitting down, thankfully, but I instantly went pale and fainted. I am normally fine with needles as long as I know they will happen in advance. Story 38. I had a late miscarriage, and after delivery, I bled excessively and fainted in the hospital shower. Fortunately, I anticipated it, so I sat on the bench in the shower to avoid injuring myself. I also pulled the emergency cord before I lost consciousness, so the nurse reached me quickly. Story 39. I once fainted from overexercising and dehydration. I could feel dizziness slowly creeping up on me, and little by little my vision was turning black, like a vignette effect. After that, I just blacked out. I thought I had fallen asleep, but when I was woken up, I still felt a bit dizzy. Story 40. I got 2 piercings done in the same day. My body could not handle it, and as I was leaving the room, I passed out and fell. Story 41. Got really hot and sweaty, started feeling dizzy, my eyes began to blur, and all I could see was black. Then I collapsed. Story 42. I stood up from the couch, walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water after a long bike ride, and blinked. But my eyes stayed shut for a few seconds. In those seconds, I heard a loud bang. I opened my eyes and was confused because my mom was no longer standing in front of me. She looked like she was hanging upside down from the ceiling. I then realized I was looking at the ceiling, lying flat on my back on the floor, and she was standing over me, asking if I was okay. Then the pain started creeping into my head. The loud bang was my head hitting the floor. I was more confused than in pain. Stay hydrated, especially when stressed. Story 43. Got too high, blood pressure dropped, did not sit down in time, broke both my front teeth on the tile. Story 44. I was watching someone get a biopsy on part of their neck with an ultrasound and a very long needle. Story 45. I cut my finger on a potato peeler and felt queasy while waiting for someone to bring a bandage. The next thing I knew, I woke up on the ground, looking up at some concerned faces. Story 46. I was stood up mid-conversation and just walked out. I woke up fully in the emergency room, confused, with about 8 doctors around me. Apparently, they had struggled to wake me, and I had been unresponsive during the entire ambulance ride. I was 15. Story 47. I have postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. If I stand up too quickly or go up too quickly, the world fades to darkness. I sometimes get severe headaches beforehand, and my heart races. My blood pressure drops. It is a whole ordeal. My heart rate spiked to 200 once just to keep me awake. It did not really help. I still collapsed like a folding chair, as the nurse said. Drinking lots of water helps a bit. Story 48. I was very dehydrated and did not realize it. I stood up to go to the bathroom and fainted. I came to so quickly that I thought I was just dizzy. I laughed it off and thought it was my low iron. When I got up to go to the bathroom again, I passed out once more. I started crawling to the bathroom and passed out again. At this point, I was very scared. I was dehydrated, having a panic attack, and it was not a good combination. I hyperventilated so hard that my hands curled up, and I thought I was having a stroke. No, I just forgot to drink water and then panicked. I had to spend the night in the hospital, and that was an expensive bill to pay later. Story 49. Irritable bowel syndrome attack. Jumped out of bed, ran to the bathroom, and woke up on the floor. According to my wife, when she woke up, I was standing, leaning on the bathroom door facing it. When she said, "Are you okay?" I very slowly fell over, landing between her chest of drawers and bedside table without hitting either. At that point, one of our cats dashed out from under the bedside table and ran down the stairs. Another time, during an irritable bowel syndrome attack, I was sitting on the toilet, felt dizzy, went to put my head between my legs and woke up on the floor. We had a towel rail in front of the toilet, and I had banged my head on every rung before falling onto the scales. When the scales turned on, they scrolled the word "hello" in bright blue text across the screen. So when I woke up and opened my eyes, that "hello" was all I could see. For a moment, I thought I was seeing a simulation. Story 50. Felt faint while boarding a flight. No food all day. Crowded airport and crowded plane. Managed to make it to my seat and asked for some water. The next thing I knew, we were in the air, and I was holding a plastic cup with wet pants and shoes. I do not even recall being handed the water. Story 51. I was at a safety presentation for work. The doctor presenting was showing us pictures of injuries one could experience if careless. One example was a man who got his leg caught in an elevator. While we discussed it, I realized I was very lightheaded and about to faint. I told the man next to me, then woke up on the ground with everyone making fun of me. Story 52. My husband needed to have fluid drained from his very swollen knee. They used an ultrasound machine as a guide. I was very curious and watched the entire procedure. Seeing him pierced by a large needle, the fluid flowing into a tube, and watching the needle moving on the screen was overwhelming for me. Story 53. I was trying to help my mother after she had all her teeth extracted. I helped her in the car afterward and saw blood dripping from her mouth. I stepped outside. Blood makes me woozy, but since it was my mother, it affected me more than usual. Story 54. I fainted while standing in line at the post office. They carried me outside and sent me home. At the time, I was just thinking that I would have to stand in line again. Story 55. I get really hot and sweaty and feel strange, as if everything is moving in slow motion. My hearing diminishes and I begin to experience tunnel vision. Then I collapse. I usually have at least 1 minute to get situated before I lose consciousness. Story 56. The pain from the coronavirus vaccine and heat wave made me faint. I grabbed a stranger's shoulders first and said, "I'm fainting, call the nurses." And then I lost consciousness. Story 57. College. Woke up after a night of drinking. Got up and went to the bathroom for a very long time. Walked back to bed and made it halfway before I flopped to the ground. Story 58. Woke up and skipped breakfast and had little to no drink either. Took a hot shower in the afternoon and started to feel woozy during it. Knew it was time to get out soon. As I exited, my vision went fuzzy and I felt my body get weightless. Then I fell. Would have stayed there but realized shortly after that my head was by the toilet. Story 59. Gave blood. Got confident. Tried to walk it off. Black circles appeared. Woke up in a different spot with a brown paper sack over my mouth. Ate a cookie. Got to go. Story 60. I have low blood pressure and anxiety. Almost every time I get my blood drawn, I faint. I have to lie down each time. Story 61. I had a stick go through my hand while playing in the woods with my brother and our friends when I was 6. After my brother removed the stick, I looked at the inside of my hand and then blacked out. Story 62. I often pass out if I am sick. Once, I passed out at the top of a staircase and went down the whole flight headfirst on my back as I was getting ready for school. I woke the whole family up and had a fun overnight stay in the hospital to find out I simply had a sinus infection and a mild concussion. I do not even remember leaving the bathroom. Another time, I felt funny while driving home from work, so I pulled over into a Dairy Queen parking lot. I guess I passed out just before putting my car into park, and it slowly rolled into the light post. I came to with a police officer pounding on my window, thinking I had overdosed. Turns out I had the flu. Story 63. I fainted 4 times in 1 year back in high school. The doctor diagnosed me with frequent fainting syndrome or something similar and never did anything about it. I haven't fainted since. I could tell I was going to faint about 2 seconds before it happened. Then I would go numb and everything would go black. It wasn't scary, but more embarrassing for me. The only common factor was that I was standing for a while and probably smoked cannabis at least a couple of hours before. I was standing, walking, and smoking cannabis frequently in high school and afterward, so it was still strange when it happened. Story 64. Blacked out in line at Kings Island. Dad had to drag me out, and random people were handing me their drinks. The same thing happened about 15 years ago. I blacked out and woke up with the man in line behind me holding me up. I also fainted in the hallway at the doctor's office after having blood tests. I finally met with a heart specialist, did a tilt table test, and have been on medication ever since for vasovagal syncope. No fainting for 14 years now. Story 65. I had a gastrointestinal illness with fluids exiting every opening. I passed out in a puddle of my own making while running to the bathroom. I woke up in the shower, with my wife cleaning me up to take me to the hospital. She is truly an angel. Story 66. First of all, a couple of things happened simultaneously. 1. My vision becomes static, colorful pixels start at the corners and work inward, and everything slowly goes black afterward. Noise sounds farther and farther away until I cannot hear anything at all, almost like I am underwater. I get very sweaty and overheat. I usually spend what little strength I have before I pass out taking off any jackets or sweaters I might be wearing. When I wake up, I am clammy and freezing. I slowly lose control of my body until it goes limp, typically starting from my extremities and working inward toward my torso. Every time I have fainted, it has been from stress. I have fainted during class in high school and first aid training, on the bus while reading a book while getting blood drawn, which is the only time someone actually acknowledged that I fainted, and a few other times. Story 67. I was standing and talking to my father when suddenly everything started to turn white and became very loud. Then I was on the floor. Story 68. I thought I could make it to the refrigerator, but instead I grabbed the handle, passed out, and woke up with the refrigerator lying on me. Story 69. I was pregnant and shopping for clothes at the mall since nothing fit me. I got hot, so I went to sit down. Then I realized I was hungry. I went to get on the elevator to go to the food court, saw black, and woke up surrounded by people. Apparently, I fainted, tried to stand up, and fainted again. I sprained my foot in the process. Story 70. I donated blood, and after receiving a cup of juice, I felt fine. However, I later woke up slumped against the wall with a very kind male nurse holding my legs in the air. He told me I had fainted on my way out. They gave me more juice and a cookie. After that, I was fine. Story 71. I stood still too soon. It is as if someone turned the lights off, and I went from standing to being on the ground. Story 72. Age 17, tall, skinny kid. I had been sitting for a while and stood up fast, turned to walk out of the room, and blacked out, then fell. As I landed, I hit the base of my skull on a countertop edge. I landed on top of a glass-framed painting that was resting on the floor, shattering the glass. Home alone, I called an ambulance and went to the emergency room. I got stitches. The doctor said I was likely a bit low on blood due to growth spurts. Story 73. Everything goes black. I actually managed to grab the school lunch tray holder and did not fall. I ended up having tick fever and was hospitalized for a few weeks in 8th grade. Story 74. Not sure if this is fainting, but I had a bad cold and was recovering from being sick. My nephew sent me something online that made me laugh really hard. I started coughing and laughing until I woke up on the floor beside my chair. Story 75. Mostly, it has been because of heat stroke or severe menstrual pain. There was one time when I passed out after an anxiety attack and one time when I felt dizzy and had to lie down on the sofa and then lost consciousness. I do not know what caused that one, but it has not happened since. Story 76. Before I was diagnosed with endometriosis, significant bleeding during my period and the pain from cramps caused me to faint a few times. One time, I was cooking with my husband and experienced severe cramps from my ribs to the bottoms of my feet. using a tampon every hour or two. While stirring pasta sauce, I felt extremely woozy and dizzy, as if my head was swimming. TV static appeared in my vision, and my face and the top of my head felt very hot. I told my husband I felt like I was going to faint. He helped me to the kitchen chair, where I sat and put my head between my knees, as taught in Sunday school when kids fainted from standing, singing, kneeling, and standing again. As I sat there, the static in my eyes continued to creep across my vision until I could no longer see. For me, it was not like sleeping at all. I had no sense of how long I sat there, but I have heard that if someone is unconscious for more than 20 seconds, it is cause for concern. It's not like in movies where you are out for hours or days. I was vaguely aware of my labored breathing and the heat on my face, but these sensations gradually faded. Then I lost memory. Later, the feelings gradually returned bit by bit. When I felt able, I sat up slowly to avoid a head rush and reclined on the couch, sipping water until I felt better. Story 77. Period pain was quite regular for me as a teenager and in my 20s during my menstrual cycle. Now, in my early 40s, I have started experiencing blackouts associated with period and ovulation pain. During these episodes, I feel very weak, experience changes in eyesight and hearing, but I do not actually lose consciousness. I also go through extreme temperature changes, such as breaking out in a cold sweat or intense heat. Additionally, I experience severe nausea to the point of vomiting or intense sensations of feeling unwell. Being female can be challenging. Story 78. I did not eat. I did not drink water. I was working the grill at McDonald's, which did not allow us to have breaks or water. I had eaten since breakfast, 6 hours into this shift, and was about to go on a very late lunch due to short staff. It was college and high school graduation week, so I was happy to cover so the young folks could go celebrate. Normally, this is not an issue for me, as I don't usually eat or drink water like a normal healthy person. For months, it had not been a problem. The problem was, I had been solo on the grill for 6 hours on a 102-degree day. I was not feeling well that day and was pushing myself hard. I passed out. The manager woke me up and had the audacity to ask, "Star, can you stay?" I was actively texting my emergency medical technician friend to pick me up and check for a concussion. I was out for only a few minutes and had a bruise from slamming into the serving slot area, where we kept food after it was cooked. Everything you eat there is not freshly made and is often overheld and bacteria-ridden. I quit a few months later after the same manager made me grill, take orders, and clean because she gave her favorites days off whenever they wanted. I got a chiller job, and now I am in one where I am safe. Admittedly, I loved working the grill. Did I always smell like a gym meeting a hot dog stand? Yes, but I really enjoyed the fast pace. The people, on the other hand, I hope rot. Story 79. Hot day, stupidly didn't drink water. Did have coffee though. I sat in the backyard sunning myself for a bit. A friend called and said he got a projector, painted his living room wall white, and wanted to game and have some beers. That sounded cool, so I hopped on my skateboard and went to his house. A few hours of gaming and about 5 beers later, I started to feel funny. My mouth was dry, and I was having trouble focusing on the game. I realized that I should have some water and take a break. On my way to the kitchen to get a drink of water, I started to feel weak. Then the sounds of video games started to feel far away. Then the light faded. Next thing I knew, I had 2 friends standing over me saying, "What the heck, dude?" after I passed out and came to in the hallway. Stay hydrated. Story 80. The first time it happened, I remember getting out of bed, getting a massive cramp in my calf, tried to walk it out, then fainted in the next room. Dad was luckily right there to catch me. I think I was 15 or 16 at the time. The second time was barely a year ago. I had a lot of blood work. I'm talking about 6 to 7 vials of blood. I was doing so well, so proud of myself until the very end. I was chewing gum and wearing a mask and said, "I don't feel so great." I took the mask off, threw out the gum, the trash was right next to me, and passed out. Then I sneezed and woke myself back up, all within about 5 seconds. Story 81. Not sure if I fainted, but I started to twitch as if having a seizure. Then I managed to walk to a bench and sit down. I went into a mental state where colors and images flashed through my mind. It was really comforting. Then I came to and went to the bathroom on myself. Not fun at all. I was severely dehydrated and had a sudden drop in blood pressure. Story 82. 1993. My first night at my new duty station in Italy after a 17-hour flight. I was exhausted and jet-lagged and, of course, went to a Navy bar. I met some of my shipmates, had beers, and one guy put the sleeper hold on me as a joke. It hurt for a second, then my vision filled with 1,000 buzzing bees, then nothing. I woke up with the man trying to pick me up off the floor. I hit my head on the bar and passed out. Welcome to Commander 6th Fleet Sailor. Story 83. The first time I had blood drawn and the second time I donated blood, I realized that needles and blood make me faint. Especially in the inner arm, when I see the needle, I literally start to change color and get dizzy. I do not have the same feeling with vaccines. Story 84. I was out in the city one night drinking with friends when I was about 22, and we also smoked some hookah. It was very hot that night. I lived on Long Island with my parents at the time, and I had to rush to catch the last Long Island Railroad train home before the 5 a.m. one. I ran quickly and made the train. Unfortunately, there were no seats. Between the hookah making me lightheaded, still feeling tipsy, the heat, and being winded from running several blocks, I felt myself getting weaker and lost consciousness for a split second. When I came to, I was on the floor, and my first thought was that I hoped I didn't expose anyone since I was wearing a short dress. A man helped me up and offered me his seat. I felt completely fine after that, reached my train station where my car was parked, and drove the 10 minutes home. That was not a good idea in hindsight, but I was young and inexperienced. I never mentioned it to my parents or anyone else. It has never happened since. Story 85. Oh, my specialty. Starting at 14, I began to have occasional syncopal episodes, usually from standing up too fast after lying down. It's a common issue for taller people. I actually have a ditty for it. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I stood up too fast again. The first time, I had been lying on the couch with my dad working on the computer on the other side of the room. Legs were up on the armrest, head on the sitting part. I finished my book, got up to grab another. I made the 3 steps to the bookshelf, started to pull a big coffee table book down. Everything went black for a moment, and I collapsed on the floor, the book falling on my head. Dad barely noticed. As I've gotten older, I've become much better at avoiding them, but they still happen from time to time. I can usually tell if one is about to come and either sit or aim for a soft landing. I did have to go to the hospital after one when I hit my desk, chair, and floor in that order. I ended up with a broken nose and a few broken ribs. Not quite fainting, but at a best mate's wedding, I was a groomsman running around from like 5 or 6 a.m., barely ate all day. Everything was winding down. It was just a few of the younger crowd, late 20s to early 30s, sitting around a fire pit. All the older guests had left for the nearest town. We were on his parents' property, 40 minutes out of town, and we were chilling before going to our tents, just chatting. Around 2 a.m., I had a full-blown tonic-clonic seizure lasting well over 10 minutes, which was very serious. I have zero memory of the few minutes before it, and it took about 40 minutes for me to regain any semblance of lucidity. I basically came to sitting upright on one of the logs with my friend, a medical student at the time and now a doctor, leaning in my face going, "Chalk, you just had a seizure." She asked the usual questions to assess me. I recognized where we were, but when asked why we were there, I looked, saw the marquee the reception was in, all decked out, and said, "Someone's birthday?" Eventually, the ambulance team arrived. I was starting to get my brain working again. They basically had to tell me, "If you don't come with us, you will probably die tonight," to convince me to go. I spent a week in the hospital and got a private room with a nice view of the trees in the park across the road. When I was finally discharged, they wouldn't let me go without someone with me. So 2 of my friends drove the 2 hours back to pick me up. Good mates. Story 86. I got up to go to the bathroom after hernia surgery and had a vasovagal episode. Luckily, I caught myself on the sink with my hand first, so my head hit my hand instead of the ceramic. I am not sure why the nurses let me go to the bathroom like that. I did not like being shaken awake on the floor of a bathroom with my organs askew. Story 87. Anemia. When it happened, I thought, is this how I go? I fell and hit the corner of the bathroom door. I still have a dent on my forehead. Now I am taking iron pills. Story 88. First, everything slowly turns yellow, then gray, then black. All the while, my ears are ringing, and hearing becomes harder and harder until I collapse. I have fainted 3 times and almost fainted many other times, but did not get past the yellow phase during the almost times. Story 89. I have dysautonomia, so my body gets confused sometimes and thinks I am lying down or exercising when I am not, causing my blood pressure and heart rate to change incorrectly. The world becomes kind of gray, and sounds become strange. Sometimes I have a warning, sometimes I do not. Often I feel nauseous and gasp for air. If I sit down or have my service dog press on my legs, I can avoid it. Sometimes I just collapse to the ground. Other times I fall stiff like a tree. The latter usually leads to dislocations and head injuries. It has damaged my memory, which used to be good. Story 90. My mom would cut my hair at home, but we did not have a chair to use, so I had to stand up while she did it. During one such haircut, I kept my knees locked. I started to black out near the end, but she caught me. Story 91. Leaned too close to a smoking test tube in class. The next moment I was on the floor, soaking wet. Science 1, me 0. Story 92. I have fainted many times from a low heart rate. There is no warning at all, which is frustrating. I just regain consciousness, somewhat aware of my surroundings, but also feeling lost. Can take hours to feel normal again. The first time it happened, I was on the toilet, and apparently this is a common place or situation for it to occur. Story 93. I stretched after taking a bathroom break. I woke up on the bathroom floor with blood all around me. I still don't know how long I was unconscious. There was a significant amount of blood pooling. I received 8 stitches in my eyebrow, and now hair does not grow there. Story 94. I was in detox, and they woke me up at 5 in the morning after I arrived to get my blood drawn. I sat in the chair, and as soon as she started taking my blood, I passed out. Then they had me walk back to my room alone while I was dizzy and gave me some Gatorade that night to help with my low blood pressure. Thank you. Story 95. Sudden stomach pain and an urgent need to use the bathroom occurred while I was in a public space where the restroom was occupied. I fainted right in front of the restroom door after panicking. I have an undiagnosed health issue where I experience stomach pain, numbness in my limbs, vision darkening, and lightheadedness, followed by fainting. Doctors have not been able to determine the cause. Story 96. I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom once and blacked out immediately, slamming my head onto the bedpost and then to the ground. I woke up screaming but was not bleeding. My mom walked into my room and told me to go to sleep, which I thought was unhelpful. I couldn't sleep, so she took me to the emergency room where I developed a noticeable bump on my forehead. The doctors concluded that I was dehydrated, which caused me to pass out. I was a camp counselor outside every day in my early 20s and drank plenty of water daily. I still think it wasn't dehydration, but who knows? I'm surprised the emergency room never did a scan that night, but since then, I've had scans that came back normal. Story 97. I was away at college and fainted in the doctor's office after having a wart frozen off my finger with a very cold substance. I was standing at the desk settling the insurance and lost consciousness. I was revived quickly, made to lie down for about an hour, and sent back to school with a note for the nurse. It was probably a shock related to the pain, but there were no further symptoms or issues. Story 98. I got up from my bed too quickly. My vision started going dark, and I questioned in my head why. The next thing I remember, I woke up on the floor. I do not know how long I was unconscious, but I do not imagine it was too long. Story 99. I could never hold my weed, and my friend who was constantly smoking decided to take a stand. You just have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Nothing is actually going to happen, just push through it. Go out and do things. Let's go get burritos right now. So we did like 2 or 3 pots, then we walked a few blocks to a burrito place. We grabbed menus and drinks and claimed an outdoor table to look over the menu. I felt terrible, like I knew for a fact that I was going to die. This wasn't regular weed anxiety. I was legitimately crashing out. But my friend had a point. Nothing was going to happen, and it was time I established that and took control. He told me his order, and I marched through the door confidently to place the order. There was nobody at the counter, just a bunch of workers rushing around cleaning who didn't notice me. While I was trying to get someone's attention, I couldn't do it anymore and sat down on a stool at the ordering area. By now, I was in a cold sweat and not doing well. I didn't have an accident, but it never felt more possible for no reason than in that moment. I sat down to collect myself, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground and the manager was standing over me asking if I was okay. I must have gotten an adrenaline rush from being startled, and I jumped to my feet and tried to play it cool. I said, "Oh no, I'm fine. Just had to get up. I don't know. I'm fine. Thank you. I'm gonna go back outside." I'm not sure why, but this upset the manager. I think I was too convincing and made him think I was horsing around or maybe over-intoxicated. The manager yelled after me not to come back. My friend at the table saw me come out empty-handed and gave me a "what the heck" look. He asked what happened, and I said, "I don't know. It didn't work. I think I might have passed out." He ended up bailing me out, ordering my food, and got me an orange juice. He smoothed things over inside and told them I was anemic or something that made sense. I've had this happen before, and I think it's just the perfect storm of getting no sleep, eating nothing, and stress. It was super disorienting, and the crashing part is how I imagine it feels when you're dying. It was a terrible feeling. At my core, I knew that I wasn't okay. Story 100. An 8-man special weapons and tactics team came through my hotel room door after I opened it. Staring down the barrel of a pistol is a different experience when there are 7 rifles behind it, and they all appeared in 1/6 of a second. Honestly, I think fainting was the smart move. My body made the right choice. I woke up in handcuffs with a cracked eye socket, but at least I woke up. Story 101. A friend called me while I was on mushrooms to tell me he was leaving the country. He wanted to come say goodbye. I told him I was too affected and that I would call him later. I then fell asleep. He called me to say he was downstairs and about to go to the airport. I came down, said our goodbyes, and then felt lightheaded. I passed out in the elevator on the way up. I woke up some time later and stumbled to my room. I passed out again while opening the door and hit my head on the floor. I woke up with my legs out the front door and blood coming from my head. Story 102. I've only completely fainted once in my life, and it was entirely unexpected. It was winter, and I was wearing a sweater to a routine doctor's appointment. For some reason, the exam rooms were unusually warm, probably close to 80 degrees. Everything was going normally at first. The nurse checked my vital signs and then did a quick finger prick to test my blood sugar. Suddenly, I started feeling very faint. I barely managed to tell the nurse before I lost consciousness. When I came to, 2 nurses were standing in front of me. I had a brief moment of panic because I did not recognize where I was. But it all came back to me quickly. I had only been out for about 10 seconds. Story 103. I went to Pikes Peak. It got very hot, and I started trying to take off my clothes before falling face flat on the table. Another time, I was having a Dominican blowout in Texas during the summer and suddenly lost my vision, then began to faint due to the heat. Story 104. Woke up in the middle of the night and vomited. Went back to bed. Got up in the morning and had diarrhea. Fainted while washing my hands. I knocked over a bunch of things, regained consciousness, and then crawled back to my room because I was very weak. I was studying abroad at the time, and my host mother came to check the noise. I did not know how to describe fainting in Spanish, and I was too embarrassed to talk about the diarrhea, so I just told her about the vomiting. Story 105. I was 22, on a crowded subway train. I had just smoked marijuana with my partner and was on my long commute to work. I fainted and was offered water and a seat. An elderly woman came up to me and said, "I think you are pregnant." That was the reason I fainted. Probably dehydration, marijuana, no food, and a hot, crowded car with unpleasant breath. The doctor said, The blood pooled in your legs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.